Hey, I get it, you're staring at a bunch of gaming PC listings and wondering if any of them are actually worth your hard-earned cash. You don't want to drop $1,500 on a tower that looks great on paper but ends up choking on your favorite titles, or worse, sitting idle because it's overkill for the games you actually play. In other words, you need to know whether this Skytech Archangel is the sweet spot for your setup or just another pricey box that will gather dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the Archangel is marketed as a mid-range gaming machine that aims to hit the sweet spot between budget-friendly and future-proof. The core of that claim is the Intel Core i5-14400F paired with an RTX 5060 graphics card. Those parts, on their own, land you comfortably in the 1080p to 1440p sweet zone for most current games. That's the sweet spot for folks who want smooth frame rates without having to crank the settings to ultra on every title. The good news is the system comes with a 1TB NVMe SSD and 32GB of DDR4 3200 RAM, which means load times will be negligible and you'll have plenty of headroom for multitasking, think streaming, voice chat, and a few background tabs without hitting a memory wall. Now, let's talk about the real-world experience. I asked a few friends who actually ran this rig for a month. One of them, a college student who streams Valorant and Fortnite in his dorm, said the PC boots up in under a minute, and he never saw frame drops below 60 frames per second on high settings at 1080p. Another friend, a graphic designer who also games on weekends, appreciated the 1TB SSD because his Photoshop projects and game installs coexist without any juggling. Their key takeaway? The machine feels responsive right out of the box, largely thanks to that high-performance air cooler that keeps the i5 from throttling under sustained loads. You won't hear that crazy whine you sometimes get from cheap cooling fans, but you will notice a gentle hum that's pretty normal for a mid-tower. On the flip side, there are practical downsides worth flagging before you reach for the checkout button. The RTX 5060, while a solid card for 1080p, doesn't quite stretch to 4K without dialing back settings considerably. If you're planning to drive a 4K monitor or a high-refresh 144Hz panel, you'll need to compromise on texture quality or ray tracing to stay above 60 frames per second. Also, the i5-14400F, despite its decent 6-core/12-thread design, isn't the same as stepping up to an i7 or i9 for heavy workstation tasks. If you intend to do serious video editing or 3D rendering, you might feel the CPU's limits sooner rather than later. Another hidden trade-off is the lack of a dedicated Wi-Fi 6 module. The system ships with 802.11ac, which is fine for most home networks but could be a bottleneck if you're on a congested Wi-Fi channel or have a router that only supports the newer standard. That said, the inclusion of an Ethernet port means you can bypass the wireless hiccup entirely if you're okay with running a cable. Who should consider buying this Archangel? If you're a gamer who primarily plays titles like Apex Legends, Elden Ring, or Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p, and you want to jump into modern titles without tweaking too many settings, this PC is a good match. It's also a solid pick for someone who streams at a moderate bitrate, say 500 kbps on Twitch, because the combination of the GPU and 32GB of RAM gives enough breathing room for both the game and the encoding software. The pre-installed Windows 11, free of bloatware, means you can start gaming right away without having to hunt down unnecessary utilities. If you live in a small apartment and need a compact tower that doesn't dominate the floor space, the Archangel's footprint is fairly modest for a desktop that houses a full-size GPU. Who should skip this one? If you're chasing ultra-high refresh rates at 1440p or planning a 4K gaming rig, you'll likely feel the RTX 5060's limits sooner. Similarly, if you're a professional creator who relies heavily on GPU-accelerated workloads like intensive Blender renders or high-resolution video exports, the card may not cut it, and you'd be better off looking at a system with an RTX 3060 Ti or higher. Lastly, gamers who prefer a silent setup might be put off by the air cooler's audible whir. While it's not obnoxious, there are liquid-cooled options that run quieter. When it comes to value, the Archangel's strengths lie in its bundled components. A 1TB NVMe SSD alone can cost $100 or more in a build-your-own scenario, and 32GB of DDR4 RAM isn't cheap either. Skytech's decision to include those parts, plus a decent power supply 650W gold-rated, is a nice confidence boost. The PSU's efficiency means your electricity bill won't spike dramatically, and you have headroom for modest upgrades, like swapping to a slightly more potent GPU down the line without needing a new PSU. Practical weaknesses are subtle but real. The chassis design is fairly plain, just a black metal box.